With rising fuel and food costs, it's important that we actually start getting things ready for what we inevitably see coming, which is going to be some type of transitory hyperinflation, stagflation, just a superinflation, right? So superinflation being something that doesn't quite necessarily reach the definition of hyperinflation, but certainly qualifies as inflated currency numbers. And so we also know that there's food shortages coming. There's constant logistic issues. And so it's important that we as a society are able to take care of ourselves and get ourselves through this and get our friends and family and kind of lean on each other. In order to do that, we have to be adequately prepared. Now, this is not a prepper channel. This will never be a prepper channel. We are not preppers, and but what we are is we are homesteaders, and homesteaders, there is a certain degree of preparedness that we have to have. Like we mentioned in previous videos, we have to have a year's worth of food on hand as we try to get through to our next harvest cycles. And so there is a certain aspect of this that just comes natural with us being homesteaders. Now, why do I have you over here in front of this? Well, what I wanted to show you, this is kind of a general setup for how we run our our electrical system when our grid goes down. All right, so you can backfeed through your main electric panel, and lots of people do, but really what we want to be doing is we want to be running a secondary panel like this. This is wired in. You can't see down below here, but there's a wire down below that connects this to our panel. This is a secondary panel that basically the generator plugs directly into this, and we transition everything to the generator instead of from the line. It's all very simple, very safe, protects the linemen that are working on the lines, and this is a great way of powering your house. Now, generation power is something that we need on a homestead because we tend to live out, but it's also something that you need in this sense of preparedness. So what I wanted to talk about today was actually getting your house prepared and what that takes. And so let me pull up my notes here real fast and we'll start running down this. All right, now, you'll have to bear with me. It's been a long time since I've done this, and I used to have these all memorized when I was in the Army, but those days are long gone now. So the classes of supply that the military use is a great way of actually preparing yourself. This is a system of 10 classes of supplies that we can get. You can find this online anywhere. I'll try to post a link down in the description. But what this is it's a planning list. It's a checklist before we go out on any type of patrol, or mostly actually really what you use it most for is training when you're going to go into the sticks for 2 weeks doing an FTX or field training exercise, and then at that point in time you go down this list and okay, do we have everything on this list? This is a great way to prepare your household. Okay, so what we're going to do is we've done some individual videos on this, but I wanted to do an overview on how to get started with your preparations or your homesteading preparations, right? So not doomsday preparations, because we're not a prepping channel, but your homesteading preparedness. Okay, so number one is food, right? So we talked about this where we want to have a year's worth of food on hand at any given time. And really what we're trying to do is we're trying to cycle through to the next harvest season. If we can get a year to 18 months, great. But we're not trying to go crazy. We're not trying to have 5 years worth of food for 35 people and we only have 4 people in our family. It doesn't make sense. It's not practical. It's not pragmatic. And it's really, at that point in time, you start bordering on, is this a mental issue with this person? Does this person have a hoarding issue, right? And so we want to obviously avoid that. We want it to be very practical on why we're stockpiling some food. So we want to be able to get through these downturns in the economy and these recessions, these depressions that we know will come. We know these cycles come naturally. They always have. They always will. It is not going away. We're getting warnings right now that we are in the verge of one. If it's not already happening, it's certainly coming, and so we want to make sure we have that. Class 2 is clothing. Just make sure that we have adequate footwear, that we have actual t-shirts, right? You guys see all my t-shirts. You guys, if some of you probably saw my InfoWars t-shirts the other day. InfoWars does not sponsor my channel. They also, I think Alex Jones is a crazy person, but the InfoWars t-shirt was free, and I wear free t-shirts around the farm when I'm working. So don't read anything into the t-shirts that I wear. They're all, most of the ones that I wear for farm work are free. But having adequate clothing to work, having extra pairs of leather gloves, leather boots, quality equipment that will allow you to wear it in, wear it out, and buy once, cry once type of thing. But then you got to kind of buy once, and then, yeah, well, we need to have a pair of boots in the reserve, right? So Clothing, making sure that you have adequate clothing to get through these rough times. What that number is really anybody's guess. That it's all on your individual family needs, so you need to come up with a plan. But making sure that, hey, I don't really have to go clothes shopping for a few years is probably your best starting point. Okay, class 3, petroleum, right? So class 3 is making sure that we have spare gasoline stored for our generator, that we have enough oil to do oil changes for the diesel engines on the tractor and the truck, that we keep that on hand and ready to go. It doesn't really go bad, and so there's no problem with storing it for significant periods of time. So having that petroleum products on hand, and making sure that if you have a farm, that you have your a diesel tank topped off. We have a small diesel tank here. It doesn't do much, but it's enough for our farm to run, and we top that off pretty regularly. But you also have to protect it. That stays in a lit area. It's got cameras, and it's got a lock on the fuel nozzle. So petroleum products are getting more and more valuable. So you do have to make sure that you have adequate protection on them. Class 4, fortification and barrier materials, right? So this was, when I was in the military, this was making sure that you had your concertina wire, your sandbags, everything set up so you could run traffic control points or whatever it is. Let's transition this to a civilian world where now we want to make sure that our house is fortified. So what we're really doing is we're making sure that, hey, let's put the filaments on our glass, the shatterproof filaments on the glass. Let's make sure our front doors, that we have 3.5-inch deck screws going through the deadbolt instead of the cheap little screws that come with it. Same thing with your hinges on there. We just did a bunch of security on our front door because we replaced the front door, and when I put the new door in there, I bolted the entire frame all the way around, and then some of the bolts I left there because they were decorative and it's kind of a rustic door, but most of them I hid, and so we put all that underneath there, and then I bolted it to the concrete at the bottom, and so it's really, really solid. The frame itself is not going anywhere. Okay, so with our fortification and barrier materials, this is where we're going to consider things like having cameras in the house. And for the practical intents and purposes of this video, this is where you would include firearms and personal protection. And so all of that kind of comes into play here. Let's think of this as the safety one. Like I said, for the military, it's barriers and stuff like that. But for civilian use, we're talking about fortifying our current position, so our household here. Class 5 is ammunition, right? So we do want to make sure that we have adequate ammunition stores on hand. Now, again, there is a fine line between being a hoarder and being somebody that's pragmatic with how much ammunition you need to have on. Do we need to have enough ammunition to get us through the next Civil War? Yeah, probably not. But certainly I don't know that there's an amount that's too much ammunition. I like to have a lot on hand, and we have it in various places, and so I'm a big proponent of people having ammunition and being well stocked in that regard. A firearm is pretty much useless without it. So I'm not ever going to tell you that it's too much. I will tell you that it's more important that you're using it, training with it, and learning what to do and how to properly and adequately employ your firearms rather than stockpiling ammo. Put this in perspective. You'd be better off having 2,000 rounds of ammo and 8,000 rounds spent doing quality training than you would having 10,000 rounds of ammo stored at your house. So now, if you're not a gun person, I know that sounds like a lot. It's really not that much. You got to think that an ammo crate this big holds 2,000 rounds of ammo. You think, well, who needs that? Well, for one, there's never an argument of need, but two, actually anybody that shoots at a lot needs it. My wife and I went to a competition. We just got back from vacation. At that competition, we went through 1,000 rounds. We will go through that much every month in competitions, and we do IDPA competitions, and so lots of people need substantial ammo for very benign purposes, competitions, training, because they simply enjoy it because they want to. So if you're asking that question, you're asking the wrong question. Number 6, personal items, right? So this is always the famous one in the military, class 6, right? Because this was the alcohol. This was alcohol and tobacco, cigarettes, dip, all that stuff. And so for number 6, what we're really talking about from our standpoint is you can look at it. You can look at it as having barter items. To me, I'm not stocking up a bunch of alcohol to have barter items. That seems a little ridiculous. But I'm not opposed to people doing that. I'm just not about it. Class 6 personal items. In the sense of a civilian category, we're going to consider this basically your toiletries, having enough toilet paper stockpiled, so we can get through the great toilet paper shortage of what was it, 2020. Having enough paper towels that we're learning how to deal without paper towels. making sure that you have quality deodorant, that you have toothpaste, toothbrushes, that sort of thing. How much of that do you need? Well, a year's worth of that is not really that expensive and not really that hard to come by. Even several years worth of that stuff is not really that expensive and not really difficult to acquire. 10 packs of toothbrushes, and you change out a toothbrush every 3 months. For 5 people, a 10 pack is what, a year's worth, and it's like $8. They're not expensive. So this is a fairly simple item that you can make one tub for, put it out in your garage, and you can have all of your deodorants, your toothpaste, your toothbrushes, everything for three years for your family. That's a very simple way of beating inflation because it's only going to get more expensive. It's a simple way of making sure you get through any type of shortages in this without sacrificing personal hygiene. The one expensive item on there is razors, and razors are a little bit harder to stock up on. Now, personally, for me, I use a straight razor, so I don't worry about it. But Amanda Lynn still likes traditional razors, so we do have to stockpile a few of those. Really what we're trying to do is trying to get through shortages in the market more so than we are trying to prep for nuclear holocaust. So keep that in mind, guys. Again, we're not a prepper channel. This is about how we make it as homesteaders. The trick to making it as homesteaders is annualizing your budget, making as much paid for annually. So things like your car insurance, stuff like that, you want to pay for on an annual basis. That allows you to get through things and plan better rather than having a bunch of monthly bills. That's why we're trying to get our farm paid off, and so that way we can get rid of that monthly mortgage payment. Class 7, major end items, and so this would be your big items. This is making sure that your vehicles are maintained, that your weapons are maintained, that your tools are maintained, the things that you need to actually accomplish your mission. This is where we put these into play. For major end items in the military, they'd be talking about things like your nods, your night vision goggles, your daggers, stuff like that. But for civilian purposes, we're going to transition this and we're going to talk about things. Basically, just look at this as the tools and the stuff that we need to practically take care of our issues. Class 8, medical supplies. Again, guys, I apologize. I had to read this. I used to have this all memorized back when I was a platoon leader, but now you just forget it as you go. Medical supplies is your Class 8. So you need more medical supplies than you are trained for, as a general rule. So because there may be somebody else around that is trained. To me, medical supplies, a lot of medical supplies, a lot of first aid kits can be taken up with a little bit of duct tape and gauze, and that's fairly simple to do. So I'm a big proponent of having adequate medical supplies. I'm not a huge proponent of having these massive first aid kits. The ventilated operator kits, sort of like tactical response, those are actually a very practical way. Warrior Poet Society has the ankle ones, which they include shears, a tourniquet, combat gauze, and needle decompression, stuff like that. You do need to get training on how to use that stuff, but the reality of it is that you can always buy more than what you know how to do with. You can learn how to use it later on, and it's always, if you have it and you have somebody around that knows how to do it, you may roll up on the scene of an accident and there's an off-duty paramedic or an off-duty doctor or nurse or somebody there that does know how to do that. If you can say, hey, I've got this bag of all this crap, I don't know what it does, but you're welcome to go through it and save this guy's life, that's got some value. So, and as you continue to learn, you'll continue to learn how to use this equipment. Again, I err on the side of having more of the basics. So I would rather have 10 tourniquets, 10 Israeli bandages, and CPR masks and stuff like that that are very basic, that are life-saving equipment. I would rather have a bunch of those in these massive first aid kit with 20 different types of gauze in there. It just doesn't make sense to me. A very basic first aid kit with some redundancy in it, some ability to put this in different locations. When I was in Afghanistan, I kept a tourniquet on my right here on the center of my chest, and that was so that I could reach it with both hands. So if I lost a leg or something like that, I would have the ability to get it with either hand if one hand was trapped or whatever it was in a vehicle rollover. And so having those redundancies. Now I keep a tourniquet on my range bag. I keep one on my little war belt that I have beside the nightstand. I keep one on my body armor. I keep one on my daily backpack. So having those things around, because when you need them, you don't want to be looking for those. Same things with needle decompressions and nasal pharyngeals. They're very, very important to have, and so we want to make sure that we start focusing on the knowledge, but that let's get the equipment now and start getting those things that are necessities for life saving. airway, bleeding, breathing. That's what we want to take care of. So significant airway issues, significant bleeding issues, significant breathing issues. Right, so airway and breathing, you separate those because the airway, nasal pharyngeals, but a breathing issue would be needing something like a needle decompression. If you don't know what that is, when your lungs are basically that vacuum in there is off balance, and you're sucking air into your chest, and it's collapsing your lung, and so you have to release that pressure. Medical supplies, number 8. Number 9, this is repair parts. This I do consider to be very important. Having spare parts, we have spare parts for all the equipment that we have for the truck, the tractor, the things that are very important. Do I have spare equipment for fleet vehicles? No, because I can substitute those, and most of them are generic enough. It's not that hard to come by. I keep them all very well maintained and very meticulously maintained, but really the ones that I keep spare parts for is the truck and the tractor, because those are the two that we have to have. I can run my business with my truck, I can run the farm with the truck, and I need the tractor on a daily basis. So having adequate repair parts on hand, having adequate repair parts for things like firearms, especially if you do a lot of dry fire practice like me, making sure that you have an extra firing pin on hand, because eventually you're going to shatter one. Even guys that are shooting things like Glocks, you're eventually going to shatter one. So, don't get me wrong, I'm a Glock guy. Well, now I'm a Shadow Systems guy, but I've been a Glock guy for a long time. But anyways, so having adequate parts on hand, infinitely important. Make sure that you've got repair parts for tools that you have that you need. We've got our welder right here, making sure that we've got parts to actually address that if we start burning things up on it or whatever it is. So, because it's useless if we can't fix it, and right now repair parts with the logistic issues, you might be waiting 6 months, 18 months, you might not ever be able to get the repair parts. Have them on hand, have common ones on hand that you need. All right, Class 10, miscellaneous supplies, anything that we left out falls under here. So those first 9 classes is really what I would focus on right now, making sure that you have those stores in place to adequately get you through any type of issue that's coming up, that we know is coming up. Again, we're not a prepping channel, we're a homesteading channel, and so we build ours to allow us to homestead, which means I really want things on kind of an annualized basis. I need to be able to get through till next year, no matter what happens, and so that's how we build our system. If you're a prepper, I got nothing against it. I got nothing against you doing that stuff. Again, we kind of, we're the Venn diagram, we kind of overlap a little bit here. So, but again, I've never claimed to be a prepper or a prepping channel. Really what we are is we see what's coming, we want to stay prepared for it, right? So we know that there's bad things coming. That's not prepping, that's common sense. We know that we're homesteaders, and so we have to be able to get through till the next harvest season. It's not prepping, it's common sense. So take that for what it's worth. There are great prepping channels out there like Ocean Prepping, the Prepper Princess, who teaches all about finance. There's Economic Ninja that will give you all the updated information that you want to know about what's going on in the news that's not being told on the regular news. Lots of great channels out there. Check out Chris Taylor over at Financial Fitness. He's got a lot of great stuff too. I like to watch his channel. On-site trav is always good. But bottom line, guys, is remember, we're a homesteading channel. That's what we do. I just want to talk to you guys about this and show you kind of how we get through a homestead and how we stockpile enough to get our homestead through at any point in time in that year. Thanks again for watching, y'all. I really appreciate it.